Hey everybody, just wanted to do that video. It was requested and I really appreciate it. Talking about the guitar pedals that I used for the new album Hope on Credit that's going to be out on Valentine's Day. Um, yeah, so there are a bunch of different pedals. I had basically two boards with me and some spare pedals. So one's sort of the big board that I use uh, sometimes when I'm feeling experimental. I'm one of those guitar players that some days I want to use all the pedals and some days I want to use no pedals, and I can't really seem to find the balance between the two. Um, so I brought all the pedals and used them like one at a time for the most part. Some combinations, but uh, it's nothing too crazy. But I yeah. So we'll start. I'll show you the big board, then I'll show you the smaller board. Playing through the 64 Vibroverb that you saw in the amp video, as well as the Gibson GA-50. Again, no post EQ processing, um, just 257s going straight into my interface, and that's what you're hearing. Um, Guitar I chose was this Duesenberg Star Player. Thought it was a good choice for a pedal demo because the front pickup's a single coil and the back's a humbucker, so you can kind of hear the difference between the two. Not only that, it's just a really good guitar that sounds good. Um, yeah, let me know. Let me know if you have any questions about any of the pedals or how I used them. Like I said, it's maybe one or two pedals on at any given time. Most of the record is just an EP booster. All the rhythm tracks are just kind of an EP booster set to whatever gain I was looking for on that particular track, which was really fun because it really showed off a lot of the amps. So for the most part, any of the pedals that you hear are going to be solos or other parts. But yeah, I appreciate you watching. I really do appreciate everybody watching that amp video. That one seems to be doing really well. So you can pre-order the record today if you're interested. The links below or whatever, right? Yeah, and hey, Al climbed in the middle of. I already shot the pedal part, so Al climbed in the middle, and you get to see him a little bit. So hopefully we see you at a show here pretty soon. You know, order the record if you're interested. But thank you very much. All right. Okay, yeah. So this is the main board that I talked about. Um, it's a trailer trash board. It's got a Voodoo Labs power supply. It's on long term loan from Jimmy Lacey. But this, you can see all the pedals off to the side. Those are ones we'll get to here in a minute. But this is sort of the main board for sort of core sounds, and then everything else is a little bit more specialty. So just talking through it at first, um, the signal chain goes into the Fulltone 69, which is a fuzz face. I really like that one because you can kind of change the mids and the input response per guitar, which is really nice. From there, it goes into the Q-Tron Plus, get your Jerry on. From there, you go into the regular Wah. It's one of the 70th anniversary Hendrix Wahs. And that one, it's died a few times. It's been rebuilt. It's my favorite Wah. It sounds really, really good. From there, it goes up to the aluminum Falcon by Piedmont Custom Electronics, which is a clone. It's kind of fun. It's the one that Derek Trucks has been using. But it sounds really good, and it looks cool, so that's why it lives there. That one's swapped out with a Tubescreamer sometimes. In the studio, it's a lot more flexible, right? From there, it goes into the EP booster, which is just a clean boost. It's set to the dark mode, the vintage setting on the inside. From there, it goes into the tube driver. Get your Eric Johnson on. From the tube driver, it goes down into that Tidewater trim by JHS pedals. From the Tidewater, it goes all the way up to the Strymon El Capistan. It's a tape delay. I use it as a mono delay. So there's a stereo delay on the board too, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But use it for both slaps and long delays if it's going to be in mono. From there, it goes down to the stereo part of the board, which is the Strymon Lex, which is a Leslie simulator, the Seymour Duncan shapeshifter, which is a stereo trim that has a lot of different features that are really fun. And from there, it goes into the Hardwire DL-8. And I pretty much only use one setting on the Hardwire, which is the lo-fi stereo delay, which that's basically the same board that I used on the Marigold sessions. So if we go through each pedal individually, you know, the amps that are running are the two I had in studio. They're not running anywhere nearly as loud as they were in the studio, just because I care about my neighbors. But yeah, they're the 64 Vibroverb and the 1948 Gibson GA-50t. I'll give you a clean sound first. And that's you're hearing the Vibroverb in your left ear, and you're hearing the Gibson in your right ear, and that's going to be important a little bit later for the stereo effects. But just to kind of start in the more practical way I used it on the record is most of the rhythm tracks were cut with the EP booster and no other gain. So, and it was just dialed in to whatever the gain level for the song really needed to be. So it won't necessarily be the same because the amps aren't kind of on the edge of breakup here, but I'll just give you an idea what that sounds like. So you can hear it's just a volume boost. And then another heavy lifter. Half the time it was a Tubescreamer, but the other half the time it was the aluminum Falcon, the clone. And I use that in a bunch of different ways. You can dial it in as a clean boost or sort of more of a drive. And right now it's set up to be a little bit more of a drive. So you hear the difference here. Clean sound. And that I like that pedal because it's really touch responsive. It's a little bit of a different flavor than you know, a Tubescreamer would be. Yeah. So then moving on, really from there on out, it's going to make the most sense to leave the drive on, and then I'll talk about the two other sort of drives. The first I'll talk about is the Fulltone 69 fuzz face. I've found with fuzz faces and me, I like to run them before an overdrive pedal just to kind of rein them in a little bit, unless I'm going for like a sparkly clean thing. But it really, especially when you use your volume knob, you can get really expressive sounds. So something like this. And you hear it's kind of it's a little bit not manageable. So if I take the overdrive off, you'll see the difference. Very different sound. So I kind of like it with the overdrive on. So then moving over the tube driver. The tube driver is really versatile. I put the boost in front of the tube driver because you can get a pretty fun sound. So a bassline sound with the tube driver. But then if you want to add a little bit more gain to what's going on there, you can slam the front end with the EP booster, and that sounds something like this. And that's those sorts of high gain sounds. To me, it really kind of depends on what you want the EQ of the guitar to be. So like the tube driver seems a little bit more mid focused, and whereas the fuzz face is a little bit more exploded. So yeah, then moving on just generally into modulation. The auto wah is it's pretty much set up to do the Jerry thing. It does it. I like it. It shows up a couple of places on the record. The wah just sounds like a really good wah to me. So yeah, so that's what the wah does, and then we're going into the modulation. So start with the Tidewater by JHS. It's a tremolo. It's set for a slow trem, and I've actually found that the Tidewater doesn't necessarily go as slow as I want all the time, so it does a little bit better with the faster trems. But the thing I love about it is it has a built-in like a gain boost. So a lot of times with old Fender amps, you'll lose volume when you kick it in because the peak of the waveform is going to be kind of where your gain was anyway. So it feels like you lose volume. So you can compensate with that on this one. So I've used it on a bunch of different rhythm tracks. So it just sounds like this. And that's a mono trim, just kind of simulating what a Fender amp would do. And then you can get, I'll move over, I'll jump the Leslie for a second and go over to the shapeshifter. You can do a ton of different stuff with the shapeshifter. But it's a stereo trim or a mono trim. It can kind of sound like a univibe. You can change the waveform. You can imbalance it. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. But I basically have it sounding like this. So if you're wearing headphones or have any way to tell stereo, this would be a good time for it. That one's really fun to have live because if you are using two amps and it's a big PA, you can hard pan them left and right, and it sounds like you're inside of a Leslie, and it's got a tap tempo switch on it, so you can make it really fast or really slow, which is really fun. And then moving over to the other sort of modulation effect, it's the actual Leslie simulator. So this makes a couple of different appearances on the record. The Strymon Lex, I have a Hughes and Kettner's Rotosphere that sounds really good. I've also, on the record, used a Leslie, like an organ Leslie, and like a Vibratone cabinet. But the Strymon Lex is really nice, especially when you put it in stereo, because it gets really intense in your headphones, and you can change the speed, and you can really dial it in. So this is what the Strymon Lex sounds like stereo-wise. So that's the Leslie pedal, and then you get into the two different delay options. First, Capistan is, like I said, it's just a tape echo simulator. So it's going to do like it's set for sort of the rockabilly slap, which I like on some of the lead stuff, just to add a little bit extra. Sounds like this. Change Okay, so then that only leaves on the main board, that leaves the Hardwire DL-8, which is set for a lo-fi stereo delay. So that's what this sounds like. And then, you get into some different combinations. So especially if you put the tape slap on and maybe like some modulation and an auto wah, you get something nuts, right? It's a good one to freak your dog out with. Anyway, so that's kind of a run through of the main board that Albert is now freaked out by because it's making crazy noises. So I'm going to take a minute, take a break, set up sort of the other one-offs. Oh, you get to see his butt. That's nice. Hey, Al. Anyway, yeah, you get to show you sort of what's on the other board and how I used it and some of the other more specialty effects. So take a break. Okay, so back looking at the sort of secondary board, secondary pedals. Just two to mention. One is a Seeker Effects. It's like a Tonebender. That's that green pedal that's over there. I'm not going to show you that one because it showed up on Lost and Found. It was in the studio, but it didn't make it on any final takes. If it did, I'd show it to you. Same thing with the slide rig. It's a really cool compressor. I was absolutely sure I was going to use it, and the takes that wound up on the record didn't use it. But it does a lot. I was shooting for a couple of sort of Lowell George type of slide tones in places, and it just wound up being better to sit next to the amp. So that being said, I'll talk you through. The first one is an Angry Fuzz. It's sort of an Octavia-ish pedal by Visual Sound. I like it because you can control the amount of fuzz, you can control the amount of octave. Has a bright switch. The level's very usable. It's like a more user-friendly version of an Octavia. Then going into the Tubescreamer that I really like. It's not been modded. The foot switch has just been replaced, but it sounds really, really good. It's a Ibanez TS9 DX. It's just set up like a TS9, but for whatever reason, this one seems to sound a little bit better. Then the silver pedal is an MXR Super Badass. It kind of does similar to what the Tube Driver does, but it's a little bit more versatile. And then another Hardwire DL-8 setup for the same basic sort of thing, where it's, but in mono for this one, where it's the longer sort of modulated delay in mono. And then I think the Flint is the best pedal that maybe has ever made. It's Reverb and Tremolo, and it seems like every setting on that pedal is completely usable and my new favorite setting. But the way the way that it got used as reverb, like a 60s reverb for the Gibson only on some tracks. It also got used as sort of a master reverb set to the 70s sort of plate reverb setting for like a really dark sort of subtle plate reverb to add extra depth to some solos. The same thing with the tremolo. There were some tracks where used the harmonic tremolo set slowly. It kind of sounds like a univibe set quickly. It can kind of do a fake Leslie thing. And then also used the more traditional trem on a few things because the Flint goes slower than the JHS, which I really appreciate in some settings. And then the last pedal is the Keeley double tracker, the 30 millisecond double tracker. That pedal can do a whole lot, and I was trying to shoot for somewhat of like an Abbey Road ADAT thing on a couple of places where it adds chorus, but it also doubles things. So I'll show you each one of those sort of in turn, and starting off with the Angry Fuzz. The Angry Fuzz, again, very similarly to the Fuzz Face, I like it into an overdrive. So the Angry Fuzz and the Tubescreamer go together quite a bit, but I'll show you each individually, and we'll combine them. So. So that's the Angry Fuzz, and if you get really with it, I like how it stays clear. It almost turns into a ring mod, even if you roll your volume all the way up. Hey, Al. You don't like that one. He doesn't really like that one, but that's okay. Okay, and then moving back over to the Tubescreamer. This is, best pedal ever made. And then moving the Super Badass just gets a little more aggressive. And then, like I said, the delay is the same basic delay. It's just in mono this time, so. Adding in, big reverbs, so, really long decay, but it's really dark and kind of in the background, so. And then the trim. This is set to the harmonic trim, and it's a little more extreme than I normally use it, but it's just really pretty. Adds a lot of depth. I do like the harmonic. I bought that pedal for that, and then realized it was, the most useful pedal that you could possibly buy. And then the double tracker. So you're probably not going to hear the difference with the double tracker if you're not wearing headphones or you don't have a really good way of hearing stereo, but and you get into some cool combinations. So, let's turn the Angry Fuzz on, the Tubescreamer, a little bit of a delay and extra reverb. and you think, why would you ever use that? Well, in context, it makes a lot more sense. But yeah, those are the pedals that I used for Hope on Credit. Whole bunch of different combinations, whole bunch of different pedals. And I'll do video just generally talking about shooting for tones and how I go about finding them. But yeah, appreciate you watching.